Garen's Quest for a Better Life by John Chikezie and Alex Flores. Garen is on the look for a new home because his current homeland is ravaged with war. He wants to move out but also does not want to be homesick, so he wants to find a biome that reminds him of his homeland. So he set it upon himself to travel across the world in search of a biome where he can call home. He first traveled to what seemed to be a barren land. The ground was rich in minerals but next to empty in organic material. He decided it may be in his best interest to camp out in the area for some time to see if it may become better. In this time he nearly died of thirst, heat stroke, and cold due to the lack of rain in the area, and the harsh summers and winters. He was able to survive by copying the strategies of the local armadillo gangs and took the water out of the succulent plants which dominate the area. As he was on his last cactus, he spotted a trail of trash and followed it all the way to a military base, where they were using ATVs to mine oil. Here's where they told him that he was in the desert region of Arizona and sent him off. Garen wrote of the desert as useless and nothing like his precious homeland and continued in search of a new home. After escaping the barren desert of Arizona, Garen stumbled into Zimbabwe. He was pleased with the sight of the African elephants and enjoyed the fertile soil that is seasonally doused with rain. The tall perennial grasses vaguely reminded him of home, but there was one flaw with this land. Garen saw the wildlife suffer at the hands of farmers, poachers, miners, and even worse, tourists. He knew that a self-righteous man such as himself could in no way stand for the abuse that was going on in that place. So he got up and left the African savanna and moved on with his journey. He claimed to like a lot of the savanna, but it just wasn't right for him. He decided to move up north in search for some good land. He had no idea where to go, so he followed an oil pipeline all the way up to the land of maple syrup and hockey, or Canada as the natives call it. As he traveled up, he witnessed large groups of oxen and caribou roaming throughout the frozen land. As much as he enjoyed these animals not being horrendously mistreated, the permanently frozen ground and the poorly developed soil would have made it difficult for him to do much in the area. The plants were all ground-hugging and short, which in no way reminded him of his sweet homeland. The summers were short and soggy, the winters were cold and harsh, and it barely even rained, so Garen knew this was not the place for him. So he left the frozen tundra of Canada for something less depressing. Garen had thought he was free from Canada when he went eastward, but little did he know that he had just entered Maine, which is practically Canada in itself. He did notice slight changes though. The wildlife were now river otters and grizzly bears. Instead of soggy summers, there were mild but nonetheless still harsh, long, cold winters. The land was still being abused by humans though. The mining and oil extraction are businesses that Garen does not stand for. The only plants there are berry shrubs and coniferous trees. Due to these coniferous trees, the soil is also acidic, which would not allow Garen to sustain any form of life for himself there. So to save time, Garen left the taiga of Maine and continued his quest. As Garen was leaving the cold climate of the north, he spotted a bald eagle and felt a true sense of Americanism within him. He followed this eagle all the way to its natural biome, which placed him in the deciduous forest of Indiana. The land was filled with broadleaf deciduous trees, and the oil was rich and fertile from the decomposing leaves. The winters are cold, the summers are warm, and it rains all year long. It seemed like it could be the perfect place for Garen to settle down and rebuild his life. But alas, the land is already being harnessed for agriculture, development, and industry. So he left. He left the deciduous forest of Indiana in search for a biome that would remind him of home. Garen takes his path south in hopes to explore a land that he has not seen before, and lands in the southern Californian woodlands. He sees the woody evergreen shrubs and the leathery leaves that cover the surrounding area. The soil there is nutrient poor due to all the plants in the area, so he would not even be able to sustain himself there. He took into account that the native wildlife, like jackals and bobcats, would not be the safest thing for him to be around, so he comes to the conclusion that he should evacuate. As he leaves, he sees the whole shrubland go up in flames due to a human-caused event. Garen, tired of North America, set sail to search for better biomes elsewhere in the world. He fell asleep on the boat and crashed in Taiwan. The temperatures were moderate and there was constant rainfall during all 4 seasons. But just like the North, there were Douglas firs, so because there were pine trees, the soil was acidic and was virtually useless for Garen. The native animals like frogs and cougars, as well as the landscape, brings in a lot of tourism. The tourism combined with the big logging companies and fishing companies were enough to drive Garen out of the land in search for something better. So Garen leaves the temperate rainforest with hopes that he will eventually find his biome. After sailing away from Taiwan, Garen's ship landed in Ukraine. He made his way throughout the land and stayed to learn the ways of the land. The lush perennial grasses are drought and fire resistant. The soil is fertile and could easily sustain life, and the summers are hot while the winters are cold. These were all aspects that reminded Garen of his homeland. The native prairie dogs and badgers burrow through the ground to hide from predators the same way Garen had once had to hide in his homeland. This made Garen want to protect these animals from the urbanization and poaching that humans do to these creatures. So he stayed in the grassland to start a new life for himself and for those he wished to protect.